Trouble, and not only has stepped up in leading with PJ the Seniors Vote Project, but who also ended up as host of this meeting, is now saving the day. So thank you. And now I can also share screen, which I'm going to do. Okay, so welcome to Necessary Trouble. We are so happy to have everybody here. Let me also say that I am pinch hitting for PJ Lemuel today, which is no small job, and we miss her, and she will be back with us the next meeting. And just FYI, Pat has gotten back on, and she does have, the meeting is being recorded. Let me say a little bit about the context of today's meeting. And I'm going to just describe it in two ways. And one is the legislative context, and the other is the electoral context. And in terms of where we are legislatively, March 6th was crossover day. So any bills that did not make it into the other chamber by March 6th cannot advance until next year. And March 29th is Sine Die, which is the last day of this session. And what that means is that we're in about the last 2.5 weeks of this session. I don't know who gets Sally Harrell's updates, but she had a wonderful set of data that early in January, bills were being passed at about 2 to 3 per day. A few days before crossover day, they were suddenly started to be passed at about 25 per day. And on crossover day itself, 75 bills passed. And as we know, a lot of those bills were pretty malign bills, and we will hear more about that later today. In terms of electoral work in 2023, big election this year is the Public Service Commission special election, Districts 2 and 3, of which we will be hearing more. There are also a couple of other clusters of special elections. The end of March will House District 75, Clayton County Sheriff, a few municipals. May 1, a few more special election runoffs. And then this is a municipal year. And for those of you who have been with Necessary Trouble for a while, you know that, in the words of Michelle Obama, every year is an election year. And this year is municipal elections. All odd years, 2023, 2025, are municipal years. And this is an enormous opportunity for us to flip very local seats. The timeline for spring, actually starting right now, there is targeting and recruitment for municipal races. Qualifying will not be until August. And then November 7th is the general election. And we'll be talking a lot more about those as time goes by. In terms of the agenda for today, so we have 3 chunks. The first is, we'd mentioned that this year, the Public Service Commission special election, we believe, pretty sure, will take place. We'll say more about that. We have with us today the 2 likely Democratic candidates, Sally Durand for District 2, Shelia Edwards for District 3. We are really delighted to have them with us.
Sally, it's Patty Durand.
Oh, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. Of course it's Patty Durand. I had Sally Harrell on my mind. My apologies, Patty. I know exactly who you are, and I know your name.
And also, Sheila is pronounced Sheila.
It's not Shelia. Okay, no. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the corrections. Legislative, after the Public Service Commission piece, we'll have the legislative updates. We'll be hearing from Representative Dr. Jasmine Clark and Senator Reverend Kim Jackson. And then we will have updates from Troublers and partners. I know a number of people have just entered the meeting, so welcome to everybody. If you are new, If you are new, please put your name and your email address in the chat. And just a little heads up that Pat and I have had some internet issues just before we started, so we're asking for a lot of forgiveness for any technical trouble that we might come across. So I'm going to, before I turn it over to Pam Woodley to start by introducing, who will start by introducing Patty, I just wanted to say a tiny bit about this Public Service Commission special election. And you will be hearing much more about this from Patty and from Sheila. The shape of this election is still in the courts right now, and the courts will be deciding whether the district commissioners will in fact only be elected by their district or will be elected statewide. And they will also decide, the likelihood is that there will not be another primary. There is a chance that there will be another primary. So our hope and expectation is that Patty and Sheila will be our Democratic candidates for the Public Service Commission this year. And we'll know for sure at some point a little later in the year, and we are very happy to have them here. And let me at this point turn it over to Pam Woodley to introduce Patty.
Actually, Pam, Sheila and I met yesterday to prep for today, and we agreed that Sheila would go first. She's going to provide an overview to the PSC, and then I'm going to provide information on the problems at the PSC. So it's better in that order, if that's okay with you.
No, that's great. And then in that case, I'm turning it over to Aquaria, who has planned the intro for Sheila.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, travelers. How are you all doing this afternoon? Thumbs up. So I have an awesome pleasure of introducing our candidate, Shelia Edwards. She's a resident of Cobb County, and as a small business owner, she employs dozens of Georgians. She knows firsthand the importance and value of a strong workforce and its impact on our overall economy. When her community became under siege by a waste company, she founded Legacy Cares, a grassroots organization comprised of her neighbors who came together to oppose it. And shedding light of the oversaturation of waste transfer stations within the small radius of her community, they lobbied elected and appointed officials on the local, state, and federal level to support their opposition, which led to the rejection of the waste station proposal. Today, we have the awesome pleasure of hearing from Ms. Edwards as she tells us and shares with us the things that are important to her for part of her platform, and she's going to speak to us in a short few seconds. But the top three that I wanted to highlight that I picked from the website was she wants to ensure that Georgian taxpayers and ratepayers are represented fairly, champion methods to help homeowners and businesses reduce their utility rates, and work with South Georgia farmers to keep their utility costs down. And those are just a few of the things that her campaign platform is about. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Shelia Edwards.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? I don't know if my mute button is.
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
You're on mute.
Okay.
Whoops, we could.
All right. How's that? Is that better? Again, thank you so much for having us this afternoon to participate with your group. I think someone pronounced my name Shelia, which is the correct pronunciation, but unfortunately, a few decades of people calling me Sheila. I've just decided to go ahead and answer to that versus correcting them. But either
I apologize. That was me. Actually, Stacey Abrams told me it was Sheila. So, oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
Well, it's hard to correct Stacey Abrams, so you can imagine just going with the flow. But again, it's I'm glad to be here. I am a community advocate. I'm a businesswoman. I am a mother. I am someone who cares deeply about my community. I care deeply about the impact and quality of life for others. And it was last year this time where I was sitting on my sofa opening my mail up, and I got a utility bill for over $400. And that really smacked me in the face because I live alone. And unless my dog's been, turning the lights on while I'm sleeping, I don't know why I would have a utility bill of that magnitude. And I started to do some research on the Public Service Commission and their role in terms of regulating entities such as Georgia Power, and just the history of them allowing Georgia Power to, essentially get whatever they want, present whatever, rate increases that they want. And then they turn around and rubber stamp that and allow that impact of that increase to be placed on the consumers. So I decided to place my name in the hat for Public Service Commission, and went through a number of gyrations last year, but was in a 3-person race. I won my race without a runoff. And, obviously we proceeded on, Patty and I, thinking we would, be a part of the Democratic ticket come the fall. Unfortunately, there was a lawsuit and a lot of court action, and our races were taken off the ballot. And we've been patiently waiting for that to return. But in the midst of that, trying to stay as active and involved as possible in terms of educating the public as to the importance of the Public Service Commission. The unfortunate thing that I found out when I was campaigning is that a lot of people don't know what the Public Service Commission is. It's not the sexy organization like, or sexy title like governor or, lieutenant governor or any of those races. It's this little benign little organization that has more power probably than the governor, because it works with so many different things that impact the lives of everyday Georgians. And when they can turn around and continuously place rate increase after rate increase after rate increase on the backs of Georgians, that's a problem, because we're in a situation where we're dealing with an economic crisis. Inflation is still very much real and still very much impacting the pocketbooks of families, seniors, veterans, you name it. And so it's very important that we take the time to educate the public about what the Public Service Commission is, its impact on their lives on a day-to-day basis, and why it's important for them to elect people that will represent their interests on the Public Service Commission instead of the interests of, big utilities and those organizations that continuously see us as see the Public Service Commission as a rubber stamp to what they want to do. So I'm really excited about the possibilities of the election whenever it's put back on. Patty and I plan to be ready to put a vigorous campaign up, and with you guys' help, we hope to be successful. We know we have challenges ahead of us. We are probably the underfunded candidates. Well, not probably, we are, because obviously companies and groups are giving their monies to who they think are the people that will be reelected. But we're here to say that we're going to give them a run for their money. And as I've told everyone, the important thing is to make sure that the pocketbooks of the consumers and Georgians are protected. And putting Patty and myself on the Public Service Commission is going to be one step closer to us doing just that, because we will not vote for a rate increase. We will be the rubber stamp that Georgia Power needs. I'm a business person. I believe in businesses being able to make, a profit, but it's horrendous. And what Georgia Power is making on a continuous basis when they report their quarterly earnings, the billions of dollars that they're making, and they're still coming back and asking for more. And so it's really important that the general public is made aware of this situation and advised as to what they can do, which is to vote in their best self-interest. And that's the vote for me and Patty. So I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
And now I have the privilege of introducing Patty Durand. You're going to see that Patty is really intense, and she is a woman on a mission. And that mission is to work with Sheila. These ladies are doing a combined campaign. They are not in competition. They're campaigning as a, together. And I'm really excited about both of them, and we're going to work for them as soon as, things are settled. So I hope you'll all want to join us in that. But when I became aware of Patty, through her emails, and I want you all to go sign up for them. Write yourself a note right now to go to Patty for PSC and sign up for her emails, because I have learned so much from those, so much. And they're funny, they're maddening, they're disgusting. She's got little video clips of the man she is running against, Tim Echols, basically standing up for Georgia Power rather than for us and for people that are suffering from high bills. Also, if you care about the environment, this is an election to get involved in, because you'll also learn a lot about how much they have been not supporting solar and other things that would not only be best for the environment, but best for our finances. So, Patty, please let us know about you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And thanks for having me. So I have been working in the energy field for about 15 years. For 4 years, I was the chapter director for the Georgia chapter of the Sierra Club. And then before that, I worked in IT. I was doing website work for Hewlett Packard and Compaq computers, but that got boring and unfulfilling. And I found out about climate change. So I decided to redirect my campaign to the nonprofit world. And I ended up in energy, as climate change will take you to. And I worked at the Sierra Club for 4 years, and then I learned about grid modernization and a smart grid, and I decided that was jazzy. I wanted to work in that space. So I ended up running a nonprofit called the Smart Energy Consumer Collaborative. Is a national nonprofit that produced research around consumers and grid modernization. And I did that for a little over 10 years. And it was a great position. It was exactly my skill set. And it gave me a front row seat to what was happening across the country at other state commissions and with other utilities, because I would go to energy conferences and workshops and things like that. And I was really on the front lines, and it was wonderful. And then I would come back to Georgia and I would be disappointed that a lot of those things, or really none of those things that were happening elsewhere, was happening here. And for a while, I just ignored it. It wasn't my job. I couldn't help it. I'd already worked in the front lines of Georgia in the nonprofit community. I wasn't doing that anymore. But then in 2019, I got invited to present some of our research at the Georgia Public Service Commission by someone on staff there. And that particular research we had showed that a particular rate plan that Georgia Power wanted was harmful to low-income consumers. So I presented that research, and you can guess what happened. The commission ignored it and passed that rate plan that harmed low-income consumers. And I knew Georgia Power was gonzo for profits. I didn't think they would actively harm low-income people to do it, though. And I didn't think that the commission would approve it. So I was pretty shocked. And I went to see my opponent, who was not my opponent. I've never aspired to public office. I had no intention of running for anything. And I went to see him and ask him how they could do it. And his answers were factually incorrect on every point. I was sitting there listening to his answers to my questions, shocked that a commissioner didn't understand work that he had done to people. And I walked out of there thinking, okay, this is much worse than I thought it was. Someone's got to do something. Someone better run against him. I'm going to help that person. And I started looking around and trying to recruit someone. And that old saw, if not me, who? I realized that I was angry, as Pam put it, intense, because I am angry and I am intense because I couldn't believe that a state that is not a rich state would do this to the people who are struggling. And the more I looked into his record and the more I looked into the PSC, I couldn't look away anymore. They have continuously blocked rooftop solar. Georgia is the 14th sunniest state in the nation, yet we're in 46th place for rooftop solar at a time when climate change is evident. That is horrible. And this rate plan was shown to harm over 92% of low-income customers that are put on this plan had bills that doubled. The data is in, and the only reason we even know that is because the solar energy industry did that research. The commission didn't research its own rate plan. And I can tell you from my 10 years in the front lines of the energy industry, there is no state commission that would ever pass a rate plan that impacted customers and not do a study on how it impacts customers. Like, that's just what they do. That's why they exist. And the fact that they didn't do a study is absolutely negligent and irresponsible. So yeah, I'm angry. And I decided to run to defeat this guy, and to hopefully with Sheila, we'll snag 2 of the 5 seats this year. Next year, the commission chair is up for election, Tricia Pridemore. She's also really horrible. If we can get her out, and I'm already capturing video clips of her being disrespectful and rude to the public who come there before her to give public comments, cutting them off, cutting them down, just other things to give to her opponent so that I can help her get defeated, then we would have the 3 seats we need, and then it would be a new day in Georgia. So that's why I'm running. That's who I am. Sheila covered a little bit about the Public Service Commission, what they do. And we agreed yesterday that we wanted to give a lot of our time to Q&A so we can find out what you all want to know, what's on your mind. So we're going to tag team on answering questions until our time is up. So Pam or Becky, back over to you. Thank you again for having us.
Actually, it's Aquaria who will facilitate the Q&A.
Okay.
Many thanks to both of you. Aquaria, all yours.
Thank you, Becky, so much. So for those that have questions, please, if you will place them in the chat, or if you can show your hands on the screen so that I can call your name if you want to share your questions aloud. But with that, I want to get started with one in particular, and I'm glad you kind of talked in your last commentary, Patty, which is a segue to this question. So if either you or Sheila win, you all will still be a minority on the Public Service Commission. So tell me, how do you envision changing things for Georgians, particularly those in those underserved communities? How will you inform them, and how would that change? Or how do you envision that changing?
I'll take the first one, because that is a question that I had to answer for myself before I decided to run, because if I'm going to be one of 4, or with Sheila 2 of 5, then I have better things to do. I'm not going to get on a board or a commission that I'm just going to get outvoted and waste my time. But the answer to the question is that we can have a much greater influence, even in the minority, as a diverse viewpoint than we can without being there, because right now it's 5 conservative Republicans, and they've been on that board for 20 years, not the individuals, but the board collectively for 20 years has been all Republican. And until just 2 years ago, all white. And the only reason there's a Black person on there now is because the lawsuit that put this election on hold was filed by 4 Black plaintiffs who alleged that the way the election is held is discriminatory and violates the Voting Rights Act. And the state realized, oh crap, we can't fight a racial discrimination lawsuit and say we're not racist when all 5 of our commissioners are white conservatives. So we better fix that. So they got one of their white guys to resign. They appointed him a great judgeship on Fulton Superior Court. That's Chuck Eaton. He's a judge there now, even though he never served a day as a lawyer or a judge. But the governor wanted to thank him for his service to Georgia Power. And then they appointed a Black man to replace him, Fitz Johnson, who Sheila is running against. And Fitz is also a gubernatorial donor, a conservative Republican, multimillionaire, a stooge, if you will. So that way the commission at least looks diverse, even though it's not really diverse. So that's the quick answer. Sheila and I would bring true diversity. We're Democrats, we're progressives, we care about the people. And the other big thing is, we'll be in the room where it happens, to use Lin-Manuel Miranda's words. We'll be there during the negotiations, and we'll be able to say, look, if you don't give this concession or deny this thing, we're going to go to the media. I'm a good writer, and I like to write, as Pamela attests. I will put that out all over my blog and my email and my social media. And we can force change from the inside that way, because they're not going to want us to expose their negotiations like that. So that's the answer, is we can definitely make big changes. And also we have plans for getting that third seat next year.
Thank you so much. Becky had a question. Sheila, this is for you. How do you plan to engage voters statewide, and what particular strategies do you have for that?
Sheila, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Sheila. You're still on mute.
There you go. Okay, I appreciate that question. I go back to what we were able to do during the primary, which was to try to engage as many people as possible across the state. It's very hard when you have limited funds. So you have to rely on surrogates and other people, other relationships that you form in these different communities to help get your message out, help keep you advised as to what's going on in the communities, and help you be in the space when you can't physically be there. As Patty said, we're doing some things collectively, and we're doing some things individually. And believe it or not, we had a conversation last year with governor candidate Stacey Abrams, who advised us that our best bet was to run as the Ossoff Warnock candidate for the PSC, candidates for the PSC, and that we should seek to try to combine our efforts, combine our energies, combine our resources, so that we're taking the messages across the state together versus individually. We're starting to build that infrastructure right now in terms of the people that we're talking to, in terms of the folks that we're trying to narrow down to be the folks helping us to go about delivering the messages. We're engaging the Democratic Party to what extent they're willing to be of service to us. We're engaging surrogates in some of the major communities, and help and tasking them with helping us identify other surrogates across the rest of the state. The unfortunate thing is Georgia's a huge state, and when you have limited dollars, you have to rely on the goodness and the shared interest of other people that believe that there needs to be a change at the Public Service Commission. And we believe that there's a lot of interest there. We believe that when ratepayers learn about the latest rates that are being applied to them, and the ones that are yet to come, they're going to be responsive. We believe that it's just a matter of getting the message out and finding all the resources we can to do that. I'm a big believer in grassroots campaigns. I've worked on a number of campaigns in my lifetime. I was actually working on David Scott's campaign when he first went to Congress, and went into his office as his first district director. But knowing that you have to rely on all the resources that you have at your disposal, as well as the resources at the disposal of the people next to you. This is all going to be a domino, so that each thing is hitting each of the other pieces across the state, so that we're able to get our messages out. But again, it's going to take resources. It's going to take friends like you guys and others that are going to be able to help carry our message across the states. So I think that's in a nutshell how we're looking to do it. And we're always open to new and better information. I don't think we believe that we've cornered the market on the mousetrap. So if there's a new way of doing things, an improved way of doing things, we're open to those, because we want all the help and support that we can get as we go in this battle to flip the Public Service Commission.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for just a couple more questions. Is it Preeti? I hope I didn't mispronounce your name, but I want you to come off mute and kind of explain to us the question. And Pat, I would like for you to take that one. It's about the IRP cycle. She had a question about.
And I'm here with my friend Lisa. We are both familiar with the Public Service Commission. So I actually have two questions. The first is about how the Public Service Commission can respond to the passage of the IRA and opportunities to shift towards clean energy from those IRA. And then another question I have is I'm a pediatrician and I'm part of Georgia Clinicians for Climate Action. And one of the things that I feel that we're not talking about enough is the safety. The Public Service Commission is supposed to be providing us with safe, reliable, and affordable electricity. It is not safe to continue to burn fossil fuels. There's a really, really good paper in the journal Science about children having, 7 times the lifetime risk of extreme heat. And they go through each extreme weather event. And I think we need to elevate that discussion because I think we're missing an opportunity. You have a lot of people in this state that are concerned about climate change, and that's why I'm concerned about it. And I think we're not really harnessing that opportunity.
Right. So for those who don't know on the call, the Integrated Resource Plan, or IRP, is a 10-year or 20-year long-range plan that all utilities do. In Georgia, it is required that Georgia Power file that plan every 3 years for the next 10 to 20-year outlook. And this past July of 2022, they passed their 10-year IRP. It's a disaster for Georgia. It's full of natural gas. It continues to block rooftop solar. It was horrible. And then in August, the federal government passed the IRA, or the Inflation Reduction Act, which gives all kinds of subsidies and billions of dollars for clean renewable energy. What the PSC needs to do and will do if Sheila and I are elected is create and hold a workshop, or whatever you want to call it, a meeting of how the state can take advantage of incentives from the IRA and rewrite that IRP. The fact that it was missed by 1 month is unconscionable in my mind, that the PSC, here it is, late March, mid-March, hasn't taken any action on it. They've done nothing. They've acted like it hasn't passed at all. So what needs to happen is a commission needs to be convened. The state needs to figure out which of the many incentives, and there's a lot of opportunity for offshore wind that the state is ignoring, that Georgia Power is ignoring, that there could be a lot of money for incentives coming to the state for wind energy. There's also demand response, there's energy efficiency, of course, there's rooftop solar. There's so much opportunity and money being left on the table because the PSC doesn't want to acknowledge that the Biden administration did anything right. And here's something bizarre for you all to know. The Georgia Public Service Commission endorsed Trump for re-election in 2020. Like, how does a state agency endorse a presidential candidate? But they did. So that's one thing. And then in terms of the safety, if that journal study is handy and you could put that in the chat, I would love to see that. I'll start to use that in my campaign. They're not doing anything in terms of safety related to climate change. And I do know that the number of days that exceed 90 degrees in the summer has grown from something like 30 to like 65. I don't have the exact number, but it's more than doubled. And as we know, heat over 90 degrees is life-threatening. And there are even a lot more 100-degree days. I don't know those numbers to even guess at them, but I would like to know them because I think this is an important issue that Sheila and I would love to incorporate in our campaign once we get the numbers. And also, I know there's a lot of chat questions we're not going to have time to get to. I'm going to stay on when the meeting moves on to the next topic and type in a lot of those answers for you.
Thank you so much. I was going to suggest that because we do have a few more questions that we'd love for you all to take time out to answer. And particularly, I want to do just one more. It was with, I think it was Karen Davenport asked, she wanted to know some of the items that you have found where Georgia is negligent. Either you or Sheila.
Sheila, do you want that one?
You can go ahead and take it, Patty.
Okay, so, well, the commission, it's hard to really answer that because the commission is negligent on like every level. I'll just say the biggest one facing us this year is that Plant Vogtle, the only nuclear plant under construction in the United States, is being built without a budget and without a cost cap. Like, who does that? If any of you have ever built a house or even bought a house, you have a budget and you have to stay within that budget. But in this case, the Public Service Commission has chosen not to have a budget for Plant Vogtle, and the price is a stunning $35.7 billion right now. And once you get into the B's, the billions, the human brain can't actually understand that number. So if I said it was 8 billion or if I said it was 80 billion, you really can't tell the difference. None of us can. But trust me, well, you don't have to trust me, you can Google it. But let me just say that this is the most expensive power plant ever built on Earth. We're building it right here in Georgia. $35 billion is federal level of money being spent in one state on one power plant with no budget, and it's not done. And every month that goes by is another $200 million. I'd say that's the biggest negligent, and I say that's going to be an issue this year because a lot of those cost overruns have not been approved by the commission yet. If Sheila and I are not elected, the track record is they will be, because they have never not approved something Georgia Power wants in 20 years. So we have got to get elected if we have any hope of those cost overruns not getting put into our rates. And right now, Georgians pay, it depends on the year, either the 5th or 6th or 7th highest bill, depending on who's counting and what year. We're in the top 10 for high bills in the country. And if those rates, those overruns are all put into the rates, we will be #1 in the nation for high power bills. And we can't let that happen. That's unconscionable that already over 25,000 people are disconnected from power every month for failure to pay. People are already struggling, to Sheila's point. People are in pain, and the commission does not care. So Sheila and I do, and we're going to be the commissioners who care.
Yeah, and if I could just add to what Patty said, you referenced earlier the solar program. PSC created a program for 5,000 people to participate, and we're a state of, millions of people, 10 million plus. So they're not serious about the solar program. They turned around last year, and the program was up for reconsideration in terms of increasing the numbers, and they didn't do so. So they have no intention of trying to really create a program for alternative sources of energy for our state. You turn around and you look at the people who do participate in the program, and if they want to sell their energy back to Georgia Power, they're being paid pennies on the dollar. And so the other side of the coin is not favorable for Georgians who are actually participating in the program and wanting to do the right thing, because why even sell it back to them if they're not going to pay you for it? Yet on the flip side of that, they want to charge ratepayers the top dollars for their utilities. Then you look at broadband. If you go to the southern part of the state and northern part of the state, you're lucky if you can get your internet, your phone to work. The governor Kemp last year announced that he was going to expand broadband across the state. Well, this is 2022. Why isn't that already done? It was never a priority, and who knows when it's going to get done this time. But these are the things that we need to hold the Public Service Commission and the decisions that they're making accountable to the people. There needs to be transparency. There needs to be eyes and ears in the room to understand the conversations, so we can then take those conversations and those issues back to the people and let them understand what's going on, because they're all impacted by every decision that the Public Service Commission makes. And unfortunately, the decisions that they're making are decisions that are empowering Georgia Power versus Georgians, average Georgians.
Thank you so much, Patty and Sheila, so much for your time and for sharing so much wealth of knowledge and information. And, you know, my fight against all of this is that the coal ash, and we didn't even get a chance to even talk about that. So that in of itself is really, you know, just wanted the utility company to do right by those communities. With that, Beck, I'm going to turn it back over to you. There are still questions in the comment in the chat section. So I would encourage Patty and Sheila to take a moment to look there to answer those, please. Also, their links, their email, the website links are also listed in the chat for people to take a moment to sign up as well and to follow them, because this is a very important seat, is a very important election. And so I think we definitely want our voices heard here in the Public Service Commission. Becky, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Aquaria and Pam, and also to Patty and Shelia. We are so grateful. We are hoping very much that this is the beginning of a long relationship with both Patty and Shelia. And as soon as we know, this is both the election, the Troubler Electoral Work Group and also the Troubler Environmental Protection Work Group both came up with the same recommendation that Necessary Trouble really jump in heavy and hard on this special election. And so as soon as we know for sure what the date is, as soon as all those details are clear and landed, we will be coming to y'all and recruiting up one side and down the other for
Thank
help.
you.
So
Thank you for having us.
yeah, thank you so much, Patty. Thank you so much, Shelia. Really appreciate both of you so much. Thank you for running.
Thank you. Thank you for your support.
Okay, and now, and again, I am seeing some folks who have joined us recently. Thank you so much to the folks who are new. If you are new, please feel free to put your name and email address in the chat. I want in particular call out Marianne Adams, who has been a force in Atlanta for decades. Marianne, thank you for everything you have already done for all of us, and welcome to Necessary Trouble. And also thanks to everybody else who is just joining us. And we are going to now transition to the legislative update section. And I am seeing that Representative Dr. Jasmine Clark is already in the House. Speaking of long relationships with candidates, we are so happy to have her here. And we are also still expecting Senator Reverend Kim Jackson. And I'm going to, and let me just say, we will do Q&A at the end. So as always, Harlow Fisher, thank you so much. So nice to have you here. Welcome to Necessary Trouble. And we're going to do Q&A at the end, as always. And so feel free to put your questions in the chat and we will get to them. And I'm going to turn this over to Pat Bird to introduce Jasmine Clark.
Thank you, Becky. Representative Dr. Jasmine Clark is someone that Troublers have known about and cared about and worked to elect since she first ran for the Georgia House in 2018. We value and respect her education and worldview as a scientist with a PhD in microbiology and a career teaching science at Emory's School of Nursing. She brings to her work as a legislator respect for data and deep knowledge of the systems that make up human health and our social environment. And looking back over her career to prepare to introduce her today, I realized for the first time that many Troublers have another connection with Jasmine. On Earth Day, March 2, 2017, many of us attended the first Atlanta March for Science and enjoyed the speeches and walking the route and waving at people sitting on their porches and getting revved and cheered up by the Feed and Seed band. It was wonderful to be among the 10,000 people who participated in that event. Well, Jasmine Clark was the chief organizer of the march. For the first time, Georgia learned what a determined, organized scientist could achieve for the world outside her lab. Welcome, Jasmine. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to learning more about what's been going on in the Georgia House in the 2023 session.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Yeah, I haven't forgotten that I did March for Science. That was pretty much what launched me into the political arena. And I'm glad to know that many of you all were there. So I am happy to report that we have 10 days left of session. That might be a good thing, that might be a bad thing, depending on things that people want to get passed in the House or things that you want to stop from being passed in the House. But ultimately, we had crossover day last week on Monday. It was a long day. It was a tiny bit stressful, not as stressful as I've had in the past, actually, on the House side. But all the things that crossed over from the Senate side, we are now preparing to debate on those. And so just very quickly, for those who might not necessarily know the legislative process, crossover day is the deadline where a bill must pass out of one chamber, so either the House or the Senate, and then cross over to the other chamber. And the interesting thing about crossover day, just kind of like a little historical nugget, is that in the state capitol, the Speaker of the House and the Senate President, which is the Lieutenant Governor, if both chamber doors are open, they can actually see each other. And so the funny thing about crossover day is, of course, obviously we're not throwing things from one side to the other, but technically you could technically toss bills from one chamber across the rotunda to the other chamber and have them cross over to the other side. But we don't do it that way. But it is something that has to be done. Another important thing to note about crossover day in the first year of a biennium. So 2023 is the first year of a 2-year term. And so a lot of times when something doesn't cross over in the first year, people say, oh, the bill died. Well, the truth is nothing is dead until the end of the second year of the biennium. And so therefore, anything that didn't cross over is not dead. It is just sleeping right now. It is hibernating for a little bit. And also because of the way things are done in the House and the Senate, in the Capitol as a whole, just because something didn't cross over doesn't mean it won't hitch a ride in another bill. And so every now and then language will catch an Uber in another bill that is, quote, germane and still get passed, even if it didn't cross over as its own bill. So we have to be on the lookout for those things as well. So if we're getting down to it, I think we're going to have a senator speak. So I am going to focus on things that did cross over or didn't cross over on the House side. So a couple of things. I think the biggest thing, and this was actually done after crossover day, but it's very important, is the budget. So we did our first supplemental budget, which is basically the amended budget that will finish us out from now until the end of June. However, we had to vote on the next budget, which will take us from July 1st all the way until next year when we do another amended budget. So this is based on a projected revenue of $34 billion in the state. $34 billion. That's huge. It's one of our biggest budgets that we've had. And so how do we go about spending $34 billion? We have put the overall, I think the budget is okay. But a couple of things stood out to me that I think we should be mindful of and watch as the budget goes to the Senate side. One thing about the budget is the governor in his state of the state said that he would fund Hope Scholarship 100%. What does that mean? That means any student with a 3.0 will get 100% of their tuition paid. It pretty much brings students with a 3.0, they would get the equivalent of what the Zell Miller scholarship is right now. And the Zell Miller is for students who have a 3.7 and a 1200 SAT score. So everyone would get free tuition. Why is that good? Because Georgia is seeing an enrollment shortage, and it's been a trend where every year we're losing students. Either they're not going to college or they're going to college out of state. So we so we were expecting the budget to reflect this 100%, and instead it only reflected 95%. So this is a big deal. You're probably saying, oh, that's only 5%. Like, why does that really matter? 5% is the equivalent of $26 million. That's a big chunk of money. And it's not like we don't have $26 million. We actually have a Hope Scholarship Rainy Day Fund that has right now in it 1.9 billion with a B, $1.9 billion in it. Out of that $1.9 billion, we are only legally required to have 800 million. So we literally have an extra $1.1 billion sitting in the savings account. There's no reason to not draw down from those reserves and fund Hope Scholarship 100%, especially since that is what the governor promised in his State of the State. Another thing that we saw in the budget that is giving some people pause includes, for example, the fact that it includes a raise for teachers and it includes a raise for law enforcement officers. We are experiencing shortages in both of these fields in our state. Interestingly, though, the raise for teachers is only $2,000, while the raise for law enforcement is $4,000. And so that bit of unevenness doesn't necessarily sit right with a lot of people. Again, there is no reason to elevate one over the other. However, if we are talking about our priorities as a state, it costs significantly less money to educate our students than it does to incarcerate our students. So if we are to make investments that make fiscal sense, it makes more sense to invest more in education than it does in corrections and incarceration. And so that's that for the budget. And like I said, the budget is not all bad. It did pass the House almost unanimously. There was only one no vote. And it has crossed over to the Senate, and the Senate still has the opportunity to make some changes and add things, take things away, fix some of the issues that we saw that we called out on the House side. All right, so outside of the budget, it's hard to decide which are the bills that are the most important to provide in a legislative update. So I'll start from basically topics of importance to people. And so if we talk about education in the House, we did not see a whole lot of education bills come out. There were a handful, but we did see quite a few higher education bills come out. One of those higher education bills would increase the GAP scholarship. So that is basically a student has been going to school for 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. Actually, it's 3, the way the numbers come out, it'll be about 3 years. And they get into that final year or their final semester, and the only difference between them finishing and getting that degree or stopping their education is they can't afford it. Students could apply for this gap funding just to fill in that last little gap so that they can finish their degree. And so we did pass that in the House, and I thought that was really exciting. And hopefully we'll get that passed over in the Senate as well. I say all that to say that while we're doing that, Georgia is still one of only 2 states in the nation that doesn't have some type of comprehensive needs-based scholarship. So we have these little tiny piecemeal things such as gap funding, but we do not have a scholarship that is just needs-based for students who want to go to college and financially they are not able to afford it. So the second, I guess, bucket would be housing. And housing was a big issue this session. And I want to pause for a moment and thank the Troublers for all the work they did on gathering information about housing. This is going to be very, very helpful as we really try to come up with exactly the type of legislation we need to put in place in order to fix Georgia's affordable housing issue. And what do I mean by the affordable housing issue? It's quite a bit of a crisis, actually. Home prices are going up. Investors are coming and buying up all the properties and either trying to resell them for prices that people can't afford, or they're just renting them out. And so people who do want to buy a house literally do not have the option because the houses are being bought up by investors. These investors, for the most part, by investors, I'm talking about hedge fund companies and things like that. For the most part, they will buy houses out cash without inspection. And they're willing to basically get these houses off of people's hands. And so if you want to sell your house, you're like, hey, why not? This is easy, doesn't take a long time, and I don't have to worry about, the bank and all the things that might come with trying to sell to a family. And so in our state, we have quite a bit of a crisis. It's actually nationwide. And also in our state, Georgia is one of the worst states to be a renter. We do not have strong tenants' rights in this state. And so that's why I was very happy to see a bill cross over that does include or strengthen our tenants' rights. It says that rental properties have to be habitable. And believe it or not, that was not the law before. It also gives people a right to cure. So if you're late one day, they can't kick you out that day. They have to give you 3 days to try to come up with funds and several other provisions. And so that one was a big one. It was supported by the Speaker of the House and several members in the House. As far as the housing debate, I think there is more to come, but right now everyone's kind of scratching their heads about exactly what to do. One bill that did pass, House Bill 514, does at least stop local governments from having extended moratoria on types of housing. I actually did not vote for that bill because I think while it takes away local control, it did not necessarily actually, in my opinion, fix the issue of affordable housing. Another bill that did not cross over, House Bill 517, would have also said that cities and counties could not have certain design standards. So they couldn't tell you the type of material you had to use. They couldn't tell you the color. They couldn't tell you lot size. They would not have had that option. And the goal being, if people can build houses with less expensive materials, then we'll get more affordable housing. Again, I was against that bill because nothing in the bill required a house built for less to be sold for less, nothing at all. And so the concern was that houses could be built for less, but still sold at market price in that area. And so now you just got homes that are maybe not as structurally sound as other homes, but cost just as much as the homes in that area. And there was no way to prevent that from happening. And so that bill did not cross over, but House Bill 514, the one about moratoria, it did. And that one really was about certain locations that were trying to put moratoria on full rental neighborhoods. This is new trend now where people go in and they build houses, but all of the homes are for rent. It's like a for rent community, and people do not have the option to buy the home. And some places are like this idea, some places don't, and now they really can't stop that from happening. Or at least that bill would stop locations or local government from blocking that from happening. All right, just a couple more, because like I said, we a lot has crossed over. Another bill in the criminal justice realm that I think is great, and I really hope it does pass, is the raise the age. law. This law would make all 17-year-olds considered juveniles and the age to be tried as an adult, 18. It just brings parity, honestly, to all criminal offenses committed by 17-year-olds. Right now, law enforcement, and if a 17-year-old commits a crime, you've got to decide whether or not that's an adult crime or a juvenile crime. And we don't, and different things account for different types of crimes. Raise the age just says 17-year-olds are still children, 18-year-olds are adults. That's the line that we've established by law, and that's the line that we'll use in these decisions. I voted for that bill. However, I have reservations because that bill does make a carve out for 17-year-olds that are in gangs. They are still considered adults. And to me, if you can acknowledge the youth or the immaturity of a 17-year-old that's not in a gang, then I think we should not throw away those 17-year-olds that are in gangs, because a lot of times those children have been recruited by people much older, and putting them into prisons with adults that are also in gangs probably keeps them in that lifestyle as opposed to giving them the opportunities that their peers have to be rehabilitated. So I still voted for the bill, but I would like to see the gang provision removed. And I'll finish off with this one. And if anyone has any questions about any other bills, then please feel free to ask me. House Bill 520 is a mental health bill. This bill is going through the Public Health Committee, and this bill did cross over. It kind of, I guess, patches some of the holes from the Mental Health Parity Act that we passed last session. Addresses some of the issues that people in the mental health space said were not necessarily addressed by the first mental health bill. It's a huge bill, lots and lots of pages. So I won't go through each individual detail, but it is a good bill, and we are hoping that it does make it across the finish line so that we can really increase access to mental health in our state. And so with that, I will pause and take questions.
Representative Clark, thank you so very much. Are you able to wait for a little while, and can we come to questions after Senator Jackson? Would that be all right? Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And that was incredibly helpful. And we also have Senator Reverend Kim Jackson in the House today. We are so happy to have her at Necessary Trouble for the first time. Lots of us have followed her with much admiration for a long time. And I'm going to turn this over to Karen Davenport to introduce her.
Thank you so much, Becky. We're so excited to have Senator Jackson with us today. She has lived in the Atlanta area for over 10 years. She does a great deal of work as our legislator. I think right now she is head of the Senate for the DeKalb caucus, for the DeKalb legislators. I think I have that right. She's a native of South Carolina. She has her undergraduate degree and her master's degree in theology, and she has been working in the ministry as an Episcopal priest. Well, she worked as an Episcopal priest for the completion of her graduate program, and she spent a decade serving in a variety of capacities in the Episcopal Church. So we are excited to have her with us today and to share some information with us about what has been happening in the Senate. Senator Jackson, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Well, hello, everybody. And it's so good to be with you all, even if it is virtually. I am so grateful that my colleague Jasmine is on as well, because it takes both of us to tell the full story. The Senate operates and functions very differently than the House does, and we often don't agree on things. And actually, that's a good thing, because we've got some stuff coming out of the Senate that I'm counting on the House to take care of for us. I'll start with education. So the Senate did pass out a bill that would allow parents to get $6,000 per child to carry with them to a private school, with the caveat that the kid has to go to a public school that is, quote, failing, so a DF school, and has to have been there for at least 6 weeks. And as long as they've been there for 6 weeks, then they would qualify to take 6,000 whole public dollars to private schools. And kindergartners and first graders, well, they are just, would be their birthright. So they would never have to attend a public school just by virtue of being in kindergarten or first grade. They could automatically take the $6,000 and transport that over. So after a lengthy debate, in which of course I did not vote for this, and nor did a number of my colleagues, it did pass across party lines and it'll come over to the House. They were very specific about adding failing schools in order to get all of their colleagues on board with it, because their argument was, well, if your kid goes to a failing school, you should have a right to move them. So I think that's probably on the education front the biggest bill that we did in terms of not helping our students. I do think that the QBE will be fully funded. We received that budget from Jasmine. We'll just say, Jasmine, you just brought us everything. We'll say that. Representative Clark sent us over a budget that fully funds QBE. I believe that will remain. We'll make some adjustments. We'll put our Senate thumb on the budget for sure, but education will remain a priority. Of course, it's important to note that fully funding QBE doesn't fully fund our schools. Those are two separate things. As Representative Clark mentioned, we also passed some legislation in the public safety arena. Unlike the House, the Senate legislation is really not helpful, and it reverses and I think takes back a lot of steps back on criminal justice reform that we had been seeing. Most notably, there is an attack on the ability for people who are poor to get out of jail without having to put up cash bond. So I'm terrible with numbers. I can't tell you any House bill, any Senate bill numbers at all, unless it's like my bill, but I can tell you sponsors if you want to look them up. But so this is sponsored by Senator Randy Robertson, and it essentially takes, right now in Georgia, if you were arrested on any number of misdemeanors and low-level offenses, you can, especially if you're in like DeKalb or Fulton County, you can kind of just sign yourself out, right? Like you sign out on your own recognizance, you don't have to put money up, and then they notify you of court and you return. If Senator Robertson's bill passes through the House and becomes law, a lot of these things that we know is just kind of misdemeanor. So a fray is a common thing that kids get charged with if they are like in a public fight. So at school, if they get in like a arguing match and the police get involved, they get a fray. Well, a fray historically is misdemeanor. It's no big deal. I mean, it's a big deal because the kid is interfaced with the criminal legal system, but it's not really a big deal. If his bill were to pass, it would become a offense that you'd have to put cash bond up. And so it also means that these are offenses that you would have to go to jail for. So a number of these types of misdemeanor crimes, particularly in metro areas, you just get a ticket, you get a citation for it. So it's a citation in lieu of arrest. So you get a ticket and then you go to court and you deal with it, and it may still be a misdemeanor. But if we move in his direction, you would actually have to be taken into custody, and then somebody would actually have to put up money to get you out. And his argument is, well, there's no limit. Like the judge could order that you only put up $5. Well, in my day job that actually pays my bills, I work with people who are experiencing homelessness, and the only way they get $5 is by asking somebody for it. And if you are in jail, you cannot ask somebody for $5, right? That's not a possibility. And so that type of legislation ultimately is, I think, very harmful to our society. Right now, we should be working on getting particularly crimes, low-level crimes that don't have victims. We should be getting those folks out of jail. And instead, this bill would keep people in jail, particularly people who are poor. So that's probably, it's one of the most egregious, I think, reversals on our criminal justice work that we've been doing that you'll see. There are a number of things around gangs and mandatory minimums. If you all, remember the 80s when we had like mandatory minimums galore, and then remember like the early 2000s when we were like, that's a bad idea, that, contributes to mass incarceration. Well, we're back. Mandatory minimums are showing up all over everywhere. I even saw a bill that we actually were able to get, we were able to amend it actually on the floor, but it's the first bill I've ever seen that had called for mandatory minimum jail time on a misdemeanor. So like your first offense, you will have to sleep in jail for 15 nights on a misdemeanor, right? So these mandatory minimums are expanding and they're kind of coming at us. Hopefully, once again, the House will be a stop guard. Perhaps the bill that you may have heard most about on news that came out of the Senate is the one number I know, SB 140, which is a bill that would deny gender affirming care to minors, that's specific to not allowing for surgeries, and more damaging is not allowing for them to have hormones, which would be actually essential for their development. So that bill did pass the Senate along party lines. My understanding is there may not be appetite on the House to address that issue, and that's kind of what we're hoping for. We are doing some things well, I think. So we have a new committee that's called Children and Families. It was created this year, and it was created specifically to deal with issues related to DFACS, to the foster care system, to children in juvenile justice situations. And I think that is working. So we have a hoteling problem, not just in Georgia, but in our entire country, where kids are in the foster care system. We don't have a place to put them, so we put them in a hotel because we don't have a home to put them in. On any day, between 50 and 75 children are in a hotel, like a hotel. And so we are looking at legislation in the Senate and have been working on legislation to try to address that situation. And some of it is just like backing up a few steps and saying, like, before DFACS is called, have we made sure we've gotten as many resources to these families as possible to help keep these children in their home? Also, it's really connected to mental health. And so one of the things I'm excited to see in 520, the bill HB 520 that Jasmine sent over to us, is some provisions to try to make sure that these minors have access to the mental health care that they need, and particularly need beds, like placement. So instead of people being placed in a hotel, they're actually placed in a place where they can receive treatment. So, I mean, that's kind of a high level thing. Overall, top to bottom, bad education bills came out of the Senate, bad criminal legal justice stuff came out of the Senate, and good stuff around foster care work is coming out of the Senate. I think that's kind of the highlight. I do better with questions. And so Becky, if that's okay, I'd love to just have Jasmine and I answer questions.
Absolutely. And I'm going to turn it over to Karen Davenport, who will kind of facilitate. I know there have been some questions starting to show up in the chat already. Karen, it's yours. And you're muted, Karen.
Yes, there are several questions, and I'm going to go through as many as I can in our time period right now. And maybe if we can't answer all of them, you guys can answer them in the chat. I'm going to go to House Bill 231, which would establish oversight boards that could remove district attorneys deemed to neglect select prosecutions. From our understanding, it would require Georgia Supreme Court to appoint a 5-member investigative panel and a 3-member hearing panel that would determine disciplinary consequences for prosecutors who decline to prosecute low-level offenses. Can you talk to that? This question by Karen McGowan, that would this panel to oversee county district attorneys, would Senate Bill SB 92 contain similar language? And do you have any insight on how these bills might be combined and move forward?
I can start with the House side. We had pretty robust debate on this bill. We had several people speak against the bill. Overall, this sounded very much by most people's admission who were in support of the bill as a vengeance bill. They were mad at their prosecutor because their prosecutor didn't do something they wanted them to do, or they were mad at their prosecutor because their prosecutor said, I will not prosecute women and doctors for giving reproductive health care. And so that was pretty much the goal of this bill. There have also been some rumblings that the goal of the bill was to try to remove Fani Willis so that she could not prosecute Trump. And the truth is probably somewhere in there. However, the bill does take away prosecutorial discretion. A lot of people basically said that, you know, the reason why we elect our prosecutors in the first place is because we expect them to have the ability to make good decisions about what they do. They do not prosecute every single thing that comes in front of them. And honestly, it would be impossible. But this bill kind of says they have to at least consider every single thing and what that means. And if someone doesn't feel like they're doing enough of that, then they can come before this panel and possibly be removed. I think it does take away the democratic process. And like I said, it's just vengeance. The bill passed. It barely passed in the House. I was actually pretty, I'm not saying impressed because it still passed, but it did not pass with flying colors. And so it does head over to the Senate, and hopefully we can stop it over there, maybe in committee. I'm not sure how that will work. I'm not familiar, however, with the Senate version of the DA oversight. And so I would probably have to pass the baton to Senator Jackson on that one.
Yeah, so ours is worse than your version. So Dr. Clark, where this is a game that Republicans play, is that they offer, or I should say the majority party, I'll try to be less partisan. This is the game that they play, is that they give us like a really, really, really bad bill, and then they give us a less bad bill, and in hopes that because it's not the really, really bad bill, we will be quiet and just let the less bad one come. So what that means is I think that we will have some version of this DA prosecutorial thing. I do think we're going to end up with something like that. The good news to me about that is that it certainly will be litigated in the courts. There's no doubt about it. But also it's not going to be brought, like it will not even be constituted if this were to come to pass until 2025. So we've got some time. We've got some time to rethink it, to adjust it. I mean, in fact, that was one of the talking points was, wait, if this is so urgent, we need this so immediately, why is the effective date? Because most of you probably know most bills go into effect on July 1st, right? Like that's, or when the governor signs it, if it's sooner, right? But this one, no, 2025. And so I think we've got some time to make this better. It is targeted. It's very targeted. It's at the DA in Athens who publicly said that she would not prosecute marijuana, and it's targeted at the DAs who came out and said that they would not prosecute abortions, or anybody who alleges that someone tried to get an abortion. That's what all of this is about. And so we'll see. But yeah, Dr. Clark, we have something worse coming to you.
Okay, so let me see, I can get one more in here. So the chair of the Natural Resource Committee refuses to give it a hearing despite overwhelming bipartisan support. If we can get 91 signatures, it can bypass the committee process and go straight to the floor for debate. I think that was Jasmine's response. So do you want to, let's see.
So that was in response to the Okefenokee Protection Act, or I might be saying the number wrong. House Bill 71, the bill that's supposed to stop the mining of the Okefenokee swamp. And the truth is that bill has overwhelming bipartisan support. Both sides of the aisle have signed on to it. It has a Republican sponsor. You know, everyone was just asking for a hearing, and the bill could not get a hearing. Now, I did see in the comments, someone said that it actually will have a hearing this week. I think one of the best things that troublers can do is contact the chairwoman of that committee, Lynn Smith. Contact her and tell her that you would like to see this bill voted on, and just tell her that, you know, this is important for environmental protection and just, you know, protecting our natural resources here and lands here in the state of Georgia. The fact that she's giving it a hearing is great. But the truth is, a hearing is a hearing. A vote is very different from a hearing. I doubt that she'll get a vote, but I'm going to root for her to give it a vote. Like, if she will do that, that will be great. And this is one, I mean, and to be fair, we pass a lot of bipartisan things in the House. In fact, more often than not, most bills do pass with overwhelming bipartisan support. And this is one of them. And so there's really no reason to not give it a vote, except for maybe external forces saying, stop this bill from going forward. And so I think our external voices have to be stronger than those external forces. And so they need to hear from people, because oftentimes chairpersons will say, no one ever even told me. The only people I heard about on this bill or heard from on this bill were other legislators. It didn't seem that important to other people, and they will say that with a straight face. And so it's important that they actually do hear from people, so that that can't be their reasoning for stopping a bill like this. And just really quick, I know we're talking about that bill, but just want to also point out that House Bill 161, the pediatrics gun safety bill, gun storage bill, will also get a hearing. And I'm very excited about that. And this reminded me of that. It will get a hearing this week as well. And this is so needed, because they would not so much as let that bill see the light of day, but with so much pressure from so many people, and starting to get pressure from people on the right, the bill will actually get a hearing. It will also probably not get a vote this time, but a hearing is great. And I would love if people could be at the Capitol to support that, and also to reach out to the chair of that committee, which I believe is Jay Collins, and tell him how important that bill is to you as well. And that's the bill that would say, if you have a child in the house, you need to store your gun safely away from the children so they can't get access to it.
Okay, I'm going to try to get this last one question by Aquaria. Senator Jackson, you talked about the total cost, or the ability in SB 233, where school vouchers can draw funding away from public education. And I don't know if you have some idea. I was reading in the Georgia budget report in terms of how much money that will actually cost if it actually happens and passes, which in some ways, it's my understanding, will kind of usurp any kind of raises they're giving to teachers, because if you lower the funding, you're going to lower people who can support teachers. So I don't know what you all think about, or what your thoughts are in terms of the total cost of that whole bill.
Yeah, so this was one of our problems with the bill, is that there was no fiscal note with it to tell us what the total cost was. I mean, that's part of how they do this. And they say, oh, it won't cost that much, but they won't say how much it costs. What we do know is that there are 100,000 students in private schools in Georgia today, right now, 100,000 students. And so if you take that number and you consider, if that $6,000 were to pass, right, and you can kind of game that out over the course of several years, we can imagine 100,000 students therefore getting $6,000, per student, and that's over $600 million, right? Like, it bankrupt, it doesn't work. Like, it's too expensive. The math doesn't work. But also, more importantly, we don't spend $6,000 per student on kindergartens and first graders already. I mean, your school might get that much money if you have a child who has special needs, but the average student receives no student, right? Okay, let's name this. First of all, we do not pay per child, really. But if you want to play within that dynamic, the average student gets about $4,300 or so per student in our public school system. And so not only are we taking these dollars away, but we're also giving them a bonus, right? Like we're giving them more money than they would receive per child in a public school. And I think what's most damning to me about this is that we're doing this knowing that we've got schools that are failing. So it's like, we have schools that are failing, let's take money away. As opposed to saying, wow, we have schools that are failing, let's really invest in our schools and figure out why they're failing. My guess is taking money away from them isn't going to help them succeed. So
Exactly. So thank you so much, Jasmine, Kim, for joining us today and sharing with us a quick update about many of these legislative bills that are working their way through the process. There are a few more questions in the chat that I hope you can address. Also, as both of you have recommended, that we have to, as troublers and members of the broader community, do everything we can to email, call, write, let legislators know how we feel about these bills, so that they will know that the public is concerned about some of the actions they're taking or not taking. Thank you. I'm going to turn this back over to Becky.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Senator Jackson. And thank you, Representative Clark. Can we just give a little quiet, just hooray, hooray, hooray. So much gratitude. Every time I hear some of our legislators, I am so proud and I am so grateful. And they are doing such an amazing job for us. And it is such an extraordinary form of service for which they get paid almost nothing. And so tremendous gratitude for your service and your intelligence and your smarts and your heart and your spirit, and we are always with you. So thank you. And thank you also, folks. If folks have more questions, drop them in the chat, and we're hoping Senator Jackson and Representative Clark can hang to respond to them a little bit. And we are going to move on. So last chunk of the meeting, we're going to hear from 4 updates from a couple of our troubler work groups and a couple of partners. Those are not the full load of our work groups. We'll be hearing from them at every meeting, but these are just these particular 4 that we're going to be able to do today. So let me jump in. And Jane Seward, if you would just give us a little bit of an update about the environmental work group, since we have just been talking also about the Okefenokee.
We have, and we've also been talking about the PSC. So the priorities, as you heard in the last Necessary Trouble meeting, our last month's meeting was our first subcommittee meeting was held last month, and we decided that protecting Okefenokee and clean energy in Georgia, including PSC elections, were our 2 priority topics for the year. There's lots of other important environmental issues in Georgia, but we have limited resources. Stop Cop City is another one, but we're focusing on these 2 for the entire group. So you just heard a little bit about protecting Okefenokee. For those of you who may not be up to speed on this, Twin Pines, which is an Alabama mining company, is seeking permits to mine titanium oxide on Trail Ridge. This ridge forms a natural barrier on the eastern boundary of Okefenokee Swamp. Pat sent out an alert following last month's meeting, and the action alerts related to Okefenokee are still extremely relevant, and those include contacting your Georgia House and State Rep, sending comments regarding the proposal to Georgia Environmental Protection Division. Those comments can be sent until March 20th, so there's plenty of time, and writing and calling Governor Kemp. DNR, or Environmental Protection, held 2 4-hour public hearings on this issue in February. I listened in on one of them for 3.5 hours. And more than 400 citizens signed up to give comments. Not every one of them were there, but there were hundreds who provided comments at those hearings. And only one person spoke in favor of the mining. This is very topical. I'll get to House Bill 71 in a minute. Right now. Bad news from crossover day is that this bill didn't get out of committee, and this bill would ban mining along Trail Ridge. It wouldn't ban it this year if it passes, but the feeling among environmental protection groups is that if this bill passes, Twin Pines would just not go for the permit because it's just a small pilot project first off, and it's not worth their while to start it if they can't really do their big mining in the future. As you also heard from Jasmine and others, this bill has huge bipartisan support with at least 91 members co-sponsoring it. The chairperson, Lynn Smith, who's District 70 in Noonan, who's chair of that committee, she blocked the bill as she has blocked all other important conservation proposals for the last 20 years. We need to vote her out. We need to really look at who's running against her and get rid of this woman. I couldn't understand why other Republicans couldn't talk her into having a hearing before crossover day. I wanted to ask Jasmine, the hearing will occur this Tuesday. So I'm not sure if it gets out of committee then what happens after crossover day. But the important thing is that we need to listen in to that hearing. If we can, either go down in person to the Capitol. It's 2 to 4 p.m. on March 14th, on Tuesday, and or reach out to Lynn Smith herself and to everyone who's on that committee. I reached out to Lynn Smith weeks ago. Of course, she wasn't available. I talked to her staffers, and they wouldn't tell me anything. I mean, they wouldn't tell me why it's not getting a vote, but they passed on my comments. So look for an alert, Pat. I'm hoping we can get something out tomorrow. I'll send you something tonight or early in the morning to provide details on the action items. I mean, most of them were in the January alert, but we can repeat them. And then this is the new thing to add, and about how to attend the meeting and via live stream and how to reach out and who's on that committee.
Great. And
a small piece of good news is that a House resolution, HR 438, passed before crossover day that will create a House study committee on the Okefenokee Swamp. So I don't know exactly what that'll do. I need to find out more. I just found out about it. I've got a couple more things to say. Is that okay?
Jane, we're so tight on time. Can I ask you to put those couple more things in the chat, and then we will push on. We will update. We'll send everything out in the update. Do you mind doing that?
No, that's fine. That's
Thank
fine.
you. Thank you. We are always a little squeezed at the end here. And again, if anybody wants to jump in and help Jane directly with that work group, if you would put your name in the chat. They are always looking for additional folks to be at the forefront with that, and they will keep the rest of us posted. Huge gratitude. Thank you. Beth Levine, would you say something, give us a little bit of an update about the Seniors Vote project?
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm going to really cut it down because I know we're tight. So the main thing is PJ and I have been meeting. We're getting things really organized. The Seniors Vote is a nonpartisan effort to inform seniors living in low-income housing, in particular, about changes in the voting laws And our goal is to maximize voter participation, of course. And we know seniors want to vote. We want to make sure that we've got everything lined up to allow them to do so, including their registration itself. So we're doing these workshops in these facilities. Pam and PJ did 3 last year, and now PJ and I are expanding on that. We're planning to look at also including Fulton and Gwinnett. And this is not just any old workshop. This is fun. We have a PowerPoint presentation that I think Pam and PJ have the nuts and bolts of it. And then beyond that, we have a Jeopardy game that helps people make sure that they're anchoring what they've learned, and they get prizes. And we bring food. That's now in our budget. So who doesn't want food and prizes, right? So we hope to motivate residents to come. And it really is some of this battle that we're all in, fighting the good fight and getting into good trouble. Sometimes it can be a bit can be tough. And this one is fun. This one really does lift your heart. So that's kind of the overview of it. We are looking to set up teams of 3 so that no one is overwhelmed. There's, many hands make it light. Plus, our thinking is, we know life happens and it's hard to get these things scheduled. So if someone can't make it at the last minute, we always have a built-in backup. So that's how we're approaching that. We are putting together lists of locations and contact people, and then a team in each county will be the ones doing the outreach so that you establish your own relationship and rapport with the activities director. And then hopefully, we'll be returning, maybe twice this year, but certainly next year also. So we're growing. The whole point is that we're starting and we're just getting bigger and better as we go. PJ and I do have a roadmap with more details about what you'd actually be doing. I'm not going to go over that here. I just want you to know, if you're interested, you won't be doing this alone. You've got a lot of support from us, and we'll be showing you the ropes to the extent that we can. And I think we're not going to have time for questions, but anybody who is interested, I think, Becky, if they put their name in the chat, you get that back to us, and then we follow up with you. So come along with our merry band of voter education, encouraging participant team. That's it.
Beth, thank you so very much. And Beth and PJ have been having a lot of fun designing this, and it looks like a fantastic effort. And I want to encourage folks to jump in. If you put your name in the chat, and we will get your name to Beth and PJ. Thank you so much. And at this point, Karen McCowan is going to give us a little update about Fair Districts, Georgia, and I'm going to share some slides for that.
Oh my goodness, I'm going to have slides. I was prepared to just talk.
Oh, okay, you sent me slides. Do you want them?
Sure.
Okay.
I will go through this pretty quickly. As most of you know, the redistricting for the General Assembly, House, Senate, and the U.S. Congress is finished, was done in 2021, but Fair Districts, Georgia is carrying on. We had a lobby day in February and then returned for hearings to oppose 2 bills brought by our friend Senator Ed Setzler, as you can see in the picture, that were ostensibly about Cobb County and overriding the maps, the county commission maps that the General Assembly imposed on the Cobb County Commission. There are 2 bills, though. Actually, go to the next slide, Becky, if you would.
Okay. Give me a minute.
So there are 2 companion bills with this. One would impose statewide control by the legislator of county maps for any elected office that is elected from a county district, which includes county commissions, school boards, city councils, etc. The second bill, that is the companion follow-up, would have reimposed the Cobb County bill. Right now, local administrations draw their own maps. I mean, you know, that's somewhat problematic sometimes. But they do send them to the General Assembly, but basically for a technical review. This would enable the General Assembly to, in essence, override those maps and impose a map, as you see they did with Cobb County. These bills did not pass this time. Before crossover day, they were Senate bills. Of course, you know, they are still alive, as Representative Clark and Senator Jackson explained, for next year, or they could pass as substitution. So we will continue to be monitoring that situation. Next slide, please. One of the things too, and I'm not going to dwell on this, there's, you know, this could be a whole presentation, is that you might have noticed that the Senate this time seems to be a bit more radical than the House does. The culture war bills that you see passing have been had their genesis in the Senate, and there just seems to be less crazy in the House. You can tie this back, I think, to the bills, the maps that were passed for both of those houses. Neither house is competitive, but the Senate districts, there's only one competitive district out of all of the state Senate seats, and in the House there's only 4. In addition, the state Senate had 54% of the seats were uncontested. In the House, 52% were uncontested. This means that if you're a senator in a safe seat, and if you're a Republican, you really only, you are not going to be threatened by a Democrat. You can only be challenged from the right. And so I think what we see then as the result of that is that it just polarizes both houses to a greater extent. If you want to find out more, and if you will click to the next slide, Becky, we have an email, we're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and we also are having a town hall on March the 22nd at 7 p.m. I'm going to put the bit.ly in the chat so you can register for that session. We've got 3 national experts to come and speak to us, and we hope to see you there.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks to all the incredible work Fair Districts Georgia is doing. If anybody is not already connected with them, put your name in the chat and we will hook you up. Also at this point, we are going to hear from Connie Rose, who has been working her heart out for months and months and months, involved in Team Libertad. And Connie, if you would just take it over.
Thank you. I would like to have a half hour if I could, because I have a lot I'd like to say. Obviously, I can't do this tonight, but with the immigration situation today, you're probably all aware, it's very fluid and there's a lot of changes that may be coming up in the next couple months. But I will try to make it as brief as possible. Also, I work with the group Team Libertad, so I was just going to explain what we do quickly. I've talked about it before at the meeting, but I know we have new people and all, so I want to introduce the group again. So we are a group of volunteers, we're a nonprofit, and we work at the airport to assist asylum seekers when they're legally released from Stewart Detention Center, which is in Lumpkin, Georgia. And they are allowed to stay in the country while they seek their asylum process. So ICE will bring them to the airport, leave them there, and then we assist and help them through there. We're there 5 days a week, sometimes 6. We have a sign up for volunteers. Volunteers can say whatever hours are available, so you can do a short shift or whatever. And there's always a lead person to help you through this. You're never on your own. No specific skills are necessary, only a desire to help others. That's all it takes. And we are the ones meeting them with their first moments of freedom in this country. I mean, so far they've met ICE at the border. They've been put into detention, which is literally jail, for weeks or months. And so many times they say we are the first people to be nice to them. So they've been in our country. So we are the face of America. And they're very appreciative. I still get texts from various people I've let out saying, you know, I made it to New York or Chicago and thank you and God bless you, etc. And we have a great group of volunteers. Last year, we assisted 3,726 people at the airport, which personally, I think that's a pretty incredible number. They came from over 50 countries. And so it's not just Latin America, as you mainly hear in the news. I mean, we have Russians, Tajikistan, India, Chad, Senegal, Cuba, etc. And I don't know how many languages we've come in contact with, but last night I counted up what I've been in contact with in the past year, and I got to over 16 languages. So it's very rewarding work. And so what's happening legally is going on now is that recently they have cut down allowing as many Venezuelans into the country, to make a long story short. And now Haitians, Nicaragua, and Cuba are in that group too. And so there is an app that ICE uses, and this is called CVP1 app, and it's used for a lot of things. But now they want people, especially in those four countries, so Haiti, Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela, to, before they even get to the border, to apply to get a appointment to apply for asylum. And which is near impossible. First of all, obviously you have to have a phone, you have to have a smartphone, you have to know about apps, you have to know how to download the apps, passwords, etc., etc. Most of the folks do not have access to such things. Plus the app is having a problem, it's freezing, there are very few appointments, it's, you know, breaking down, etc. And so what's happened since they've started that is now many people from those four countries, they are being expedited out of the country even more rapidly. So it has cut down the number of people from those countries trying to come in here. The other bad effect is that with Cubans, there's more of them trying to come by water now in those rickety boats. So there's going to be more, you know, problems with that, obviously. Anyway, and then the other thing on May 11th, which is going to be really affecting us at the airport, is Title 42 will probably go away. Title 42 was started beginning of COVID during the Trump administration and was to kind of to close down the borders, to try to keep COVID literally out of the country and all. May 11th is when the government says that the crisis for COVID is over. And so probably Title 42 will go away. So they're feeling that a lot more people will be coming across the border. Of course, there's people fighting it and all, but I did actually talk to a ICE agent recently and said, do you think it's going to happen? I said, we're thinking we need to gear up. And he said, you better gear up. He thinks it's going to happen. So for us at the airport, we think this for the month of April, there'll probably be a lot more people released from the detention center, so they have more room in the detention center. At this point, the detention center, and again, I'm just talking about Stewart, but obviously this will happen all over the country, but our concern is Stewart, is there's over a little over 1,000 people in there now, and probably about 500 of them will be eligible to be released. So we're anticipating we'll be very busy. So we definitely need more volunteers, more supplies, more money. So if anybody wants to help out. And the third thing I'm going to go over quickly for you is that Biden recently said that he would like to start once again putting families when they come across the border in detention. He had stopped doing that, and they were doing kind of an alternate type of detention, I guess it would call it. And they were putting on, those ankle bracelets so they can monitor people, or giving them phones that would track them and all. But now he wants to put families back in detention. What can I say? Having children in detention, I mean, obviously with their families better than separated, but what can I say? We're all in agreement, I'm sure, that we don't want innocent children put in prison. And literally, these are prisons. I've been to Stewart, the barbed wire, et cetera, et cetera. So what you can do is, we're travelers speak up, talk to your representatives. I know Nikema Williams is great to talk to. She's very supportive. So, reach out to her. Warnock and Ossoff are supportive, not as much, because I guess they're playing the game with the Republicans and all too. But please reach out to representatives and have them, use their powers to do something that's more just for these people. And just a quick thing, because our Nicoletta is working too with El Refugio, which is another nonprofit down in Lumpkin, Georgia. It's a nonprofit, plus it's an actual building. And they do a lot of work to support the families and all of people that are in Stewart. And anyway, I know my time's short, so I won't go into all that. But Nicoletta is typing away and hopefully putting a lot of information in the chat of how you can contact me, Maggie, who's our administrator, Nicoletta, El Refugio. And also, I just want to say there's a new Netflix documentary I want to suggest everybody watch, and that could be in the chat too. I think most people have Netflix, but it's very good documentary on immigrants in the United States today. It's called Split at the Root. And again, it'll be in the chat. And anyway, if anybody wants to help us, we'd appreciate it. And I'll call it quits.
Connie, thank you so very much. And can you just give a little quiet shout out to Connie, not just for that update, but for all the extraordinary work she has been really doing this and making sure it happens. And it has involved all kinds of work, and she has been doing just a really heroic job. So we are very grateful. We will be hearing more down the line about Team Libertad. There we go, Team Libertad. See, you might even get some swag. So I want to really encourage anybody who has some availability in terms of spending some time at the airport greeting folks to put your name in the chat. They are really in need of additional folks, and consider, and we will be hearing more about Team Libertad and also about El Refugio. Those are going to be our two primary partners in terms of work on immigration. We are almost at time. I'd like to do two things. One is I want to just let you know the date of the April Troubler meeting is going to be April 16th. It's been adjusted a little bit because of holidays, so we will meet again on April 16th. And many of you, for those of you who were here at the end of the last meeting, you know that we had this incredible technical snag of me trying to play a song in closing and realizing like 3 minutes into it that nobody else was hearing the volume but me, and I was having a fantastic time because it's a really beautiful song. So For those of you who can stay for 3 more minutes, we're going to try to have an emotionally corrective experience of this. And I'm going to look at the chat this time, and so I will see if you are not hearing the volume. But it is a beautiful song. Those of you who know Sweet Honey in the Rock will remember it. This, as we tried to do it last time, this goes out to Tyree Nichols' family. So stay with me just for a minute, if you would, and give me another chance to pull this off here.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of black men, black mothers' sons is as important as the killing of white men, white mothers' sons. That which touches me most is that I had a chance to work with people, passing on to others that which was passed on to me. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. To me, young people come first. They have the courage where we failed. And if I can but shed some light as they carry us through the gale, the older I get, the better I know that the secret of my going on is when the reins are in the hands of the young who dare to run against the storm. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Not needing to clutch for power, not needing the light just to shine on me. I need to be one in the number as we dedicate to me. Struggling myself don't mean a whole lot. I've come to realize that teaching others just to stand up and fight is the only way a struggle survives. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. I'm a woman who speaks in a voice, and I must be heard. Sometimes I can be quite difficult. I'll bow to no man's word. Oh, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes.
I needed
Okay,
that. Wow.
thank you.
Can you give us a link for that?
I will send out a link for that.
That was
Thank,
worth the wait.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for hanging in with it. Hopefully that was a corrective experience from last time when I was the only one listening to it. Thanks to all troublers. Thank you for staying. Can we just all take our mute off for a moment and just do a huge hooray for all the troublers who are really working very hard.
Hooray!
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for hanging in with all the good work. Thank you for signing up to help. Thank you for hanging in with the technical glitches all the time. Thank you for being so good-hearted. And next time PJ will be back. Love to everybody.
Thanks to you, Becky, for a great meeting.
Thank you.
Becky.
Becky.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Becky.